Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to dive into 5 ways to impact the color in your images using tools in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. Let's jump in. So in editing for color, I am here in Lightroom Classic, but the tools I'm going to show you work with the regular Lightroom desktop version as well as Adobe Camera Raw if you're a Photoshop user. So in jumping in, we are going to cover 5 tools. We're going to cover the HSL, tint temp, color range, color grading, and tone curve to impact the color in our images. So in looking at this gorgeous tulip image, I love the contrast of the red and the single pink bloom. We can go down and work with our HSL panel. So the HSL panel controls your hue of your color, which think about that like the paint. So paint on a paintbrush, we can actually change the color if we go to hue of our reds, making them more magenta tone or making them more orange. So it's the actual color. Saturation is how much of the paint we apply. So we can really darken that red or we can soften and mute it. And then luminance is the brightness of our color. So we can brighten the red or we can make it darker again. So the interesting thing to remember about HSL is that colors have multiple colors in them. And so as we go through editing, I will show you some examples. A couple colors to watch out for. Greens typically have yellow in them as well. Magentas often have red, and blues typically have green in them. A great tool here in the HSL panel is this little target tool that you can bring over. You hover it over your color, and as you slide, so you're dragging your mouse or trackpad up or down, you can see what colors make up the color in your image. So as I'm hovering right now over the green foliage and I scroll down, we can see this green actually has a lot of aqua in it. So if I'm wanting to customize the color in this image, I need to know that it's not just green. It actually has a lot of aqua tones. So adjusting that, I could desaturate it or I could emphasize it and saturate it to make it more pronounced. So it's really important to use this tool, especially if you're just getting started editing color. All right, so I'm going to take this image back to where I was when I started, and the HSL panel we've reviewed, but I want to talk about how to use it with a mask. So when you're working with color, it's important to sometimes make selective color adjustments. So if we are working in our HSL panel, we are making global adjustments to the entire image. So again, if I want to saturate the red, it's saturating the red in the tulip and the red in all parts of my image. So what I want to do is emphasize just this center tulip. So we're going to do a mask, and I'm going to use the objects mask. I like to use the square option. There is a circular lasso option. I just come around and select that. And now Lightroom is going to detect just the head of this tulip, and it did a great job masking it for us. At this point, we can begin. I'm going to remove my overlay. We can begin to make adjustments. So I can pop the exposure a little bit. I can come down to saturation and I can saturate this pink. I could also change the hue. So if I want to make it a little more magenta or a little less, I could even make it more peach colored, green. You can see we could get really crazy with it depending on what you're wanting to do. I want to keep it in this kind of pink magenta family. So there we go. So that is one way to modify and selectively adjust parts of your image. So let's go to another image and see how I would edit for color. So with this image, we have a primary subject again, and we have our background. So for this image, I want to show you another tool to impact color. So this would be our temperature panel. So this is a great way to adjust the colors in your image. This is your white balance, but with the temp tint sliders, you can add more green to this image. You can see it's making a global adjustment, or we could reduce the green. We can also add more blue tones, but you can see it is a global adjustment, so it's making it to all parts of the image. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back And if we want to make a selective adjustment to this image, again, we can come up to our mask and we have a couple options here. Let's start with selecting our subject. Since the subject is so prominent in this image, Lightroom did a great job of just selecting the subject here. At this point, I'm going to turn off my overlay. And again, I'm going to try first using the temp and temperature slider. Look how I can make this iris much bluer just using that slider. I can also adjust the green, giving it a little bit less green tones, pulling it over or making it greener. Now that's impacting this area right in here, so we want to be careful with that. But the temperature slider is a quick way to adjust your subject. Now the other way would again be to saturate our color, and we could also come down and shift the color tones. So if I wanted to make this a purple iris, you can see I can come in and do that. I have to be careful though, because my mask is impacting all parts of my image. So let's say I wanted this iris to be more purple, but I don't like what it's doing to the green. All I have to do is come up to my mask, click subtract, and I can use the brush tool, or I could use color range to subtract the green area from my mask. And we can hold the shift key and do that in multiple areas until we get all of that removed. So you can see, just continue to hold. You can do up to 5 clicks, and now we've removed that area from our mask and we've adjusted that. All right, so that's a way to change the color if you wanted to, as well as saturate it. Now I'm going to close out of this and I want to go and correct. It looks like my temperature got a little wonky kind of green. So I'm going to bring that back. And now if I wanted to impact the yellow inside this area, we have a couple options with the mask tool. So I can come in and create a new mask. And I think for this, I'm going to use the color range again. And I want to come in and just select that yellow. Now I don't want the background, and I do want to hold the shift key and select over here. Okay, but I don't want all of this background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my color range mask that we just created, click these 3 dots and do intersect mask with, and I'm going to do intersect with, and I'm going to do select subject. So it's kind of a backwards way of getting around to just selecting the screen. Now it still added this stem. So what I'm going to do is just subtract objects, and I'm just going to draw a box. Now there are so many ways to work with the mask, and this is just one example. I'm still going to need to subtract again. So I may just grab the brush and brush it off where you don't want it. So I just want to show you multiple ways, because sometimes you need multiple tools to get the mask the way you want it. Now, it probably would have been quicker to just brush in this area, but I wanted to show you those other options so that you have those in your toolbox when you're editing. So now we can come in and we can saturate that yellow, and we can also make sure, let's say we want to make it a little more of that kind of bright yellow, and we want to get rid of any green tones there. So I'm just going to use the temperature slider to move that away from green and work on that way. Okay, so we've covered a little bit about color range, and we have covered using the different mask and the hue saturation. So let's look at another image where I want to show you how to use the tone curve for color. So the tone curve is located right under your basic editing panel, and it has this red, green, and blue channel. If you select the blue channel, this is a way that you can adjust using your histogram the colors in your image. So this image has a lot of blue in the highlights. So I'm going to come up towards the highlights and put a dot and bring that up. Look how it emphasizes the blue in my image. And we can bring that up even more. We could also desaturate the blue in the highlights by bringing that down if we wanted. So depending on what you're wanting, one thing I like to do is come to the middle of the tone curve, which is your midtones. And this is where you could just softly enhance the middle of your image. Now at this point with this image, I like what the tone curve's done, but maybe I want to add some additional pink to the image. So this is where I could use color grading. A quick way to color grade your image is to use the global adjustment, which is over here on the far right. What I like to do is take the saturation all the way up, drag my slider around to the color that I want. In this case, I want to add some additional pink tones. And then I bring the saturation all the way back down. You can kind of adjust. You can also play with the brightness. So now I can show you before and after. Now it's washed out my flowers just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is go up to the mask tool, select subject. And I selected subject because I feel pretty confident Lightroom can pick out that subject from the sky. And now I'm going to increase the whites in my subject to bring those back a little bit, pop the exposure a little, and work on, I'm going to take the temperature slider and play with that, removing any yellow tones. I want to make it a little bit cooler and increase any saturation and maybe add some texture to just make those little flowers pop and maybe even a little contrast. So now we've made a selective adjustment impacting just our subject. We added some beautiful pink tones using color grading, and we also applied a tone curve to really soften and enhance our blues. So another way to impact color here in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. All right, let's look at another example. And for this image, I want to really make these colors pop. It was a beautiful day, but it was so bright. A lot of the colors are they're coming out a little muted. So let's start here in our panel. And the first thing that I want to do is see what happens to change the temperature and tint. So you can see this is going to make the image a lot cooler versus that yellow kind of haze. And I want to bring out more of the blue tone. So I am going to adjust the temp just a little bit to give it a little bit more of the blue color tones. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. Now I want to selectively adjust the colors in my image. So I'm going to go to the mask, range, and I'm going to select color range. I'm going to start with the blue in this image and come in and select those purple tones. Now there's a lot of blue in the sky up here, but what I'm going to do is let's hold the shift key and let's select some more blue or purple colors right over here. Okay, so that gave us a little bit larger, but it also impacted up here. So now we're going to go up to our color range and we're going to refine it. So I'm going to take it back. I really just want to affect the area here. But I think what I'll do is click subtract, and I'm going to use the brush tool. I'm going to make it really large. Whoops, messed that up. Let's select subtract, brush, and I'm going to make my brush large using my bracket key. And I am just going to come in and remove it from this top area. Now we have our mask exactly where I want it. And now what I can do is take my saturation and really pop the blue colors, give them a little pop of exposure. And I can also maybe play with the blue temp slider and even the hue if I want to make it a little more purple or keep it blue. And I'm going to really bump the exposure on that. Now we can turn this mask on and off to see the difference. And I can also, let's make sure the show mask is on, show you the before key and the after. So we're giving this image a lot more of those kind of spring soft blue tones. All right, so the next color I want to adjust is the yellow. So I'm going to create another mask, color range. We're going to come in and select these little yellow flowers. And it did a great job. You can see all the little faces selected. The color here is yellow. I don't need to refine this one. I like what it's selected. I'm just going to saturate that yellow to make it pop a little bit. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do with this image is impact our sky. So I'm going to go create new mask, and we're going to do a select sky. And it did a nice job. I'm going to remove my overlay so that I can see what I want to do. I'm going to start with dehaze, see if I can bring out some of the clouds and the colors in the sky. And it didn't do a whole lot. I'm going to use my temperature slider to give it a little bit more blue. There we go. And play with the highlights just a little bit, maybe bring those down. Yeah, to give a little bit more contrast between these cherry trees and the sky. All right, I like that. So here is before. You can see my sky was a little blown out. This was a quick snapshot, but after, what a difference with some color edits. Last image is another spring. This was taken with a Lens Baby lens, so it's very not super focused. It's supposed to be really creative. But I want to show you with this image what a difference the temp and temperature sliders make, as well as the tone curve. So you can see I can make this image a lot cooler, or I could add more warmth. So I think the temp and temperature sliders are often underutilized when we edit. This would also remove some of that pink cast. So if I just want a little bit of that, I can adjust with these two sliders. Now next, I can come down to the red channel in my tone curve. And this is where in the middle, the midtones, I can really increase those reds, or again, I could desaturate them, bringing it down. This is making a global adjustment to my image. We could come in also with the green channel and again, play with just adding a little bit of that pink tone or reducing it. You could also do that just in the highlights or just in the shadows. So some different ways to use some of the tools. Now with our HSL panel, I can grab the target tool and come over to this color in my image, and I can drag my mouse or trackpad up or down, and we can see that this color has a lot of orange in it. And so actually, I want to remove some of that orange because this was really pink. These are pink plum trees. So by desaturating the orange, it's definitely making more pink, and I can increase the red tones. So now if you look before, look at that orange cast. I didn't realize that it had that much orange in it until I used that target tool. This is much more representative of the scene of spring and of these plum trees. So look at the difference, especially in this pathway. It was very orange versus now. So I hope that you will play around with the different ways to impact color in your image in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. Have a great week, everybody.